Job growth across the U.S. slowed last month in a sign the labor market may be cooling this spring. The Labor Department says employers added 175,000 jobs in April. That's the smallest monthly job creation recorded since October of last year. Unemployment increased marginally to 3.9%. It has hovered above 3.5% since last summer, but remains under 4%. Jared Berstein is at the White House. He is the chair of the U.S. Council of Economic Advisors and joins us now. Jared, thanks very much for being with us. So I want to ask you about a recent CBS News poll that shows more voters from Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin believe the economy was better under Donald Trump than it is now. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think that people have been through a lot since the pandemic, and you certainly saw President Biden take office and make sure that things really turned around pretty quickly. Obviously, vaccines got out there much more efficiently, and one of the things you saw under this president was the job market really take off. And if you look at where we are in terms of today's job market, and I mean today, based on today's report, it's a lot different than where we were 4 years ago. 15.4 million jobs on this president's watch, an unemployment rate like your graphic just showed, below 4% for 27 months in a row. That is a record. We haven't seen that for 70 years. We see now wages beating prices. That's really important for working families. Wages are outpacing inflation. Now, we have more work to do when it comes to cutting costs, but if you actually ask people what they think about the job market, if you poll them on that, polls very, very high, very solid numbers.
So why do you think the president isn't getting more credit when you ask voters in these kinds of polls about how he's doing on the economy?
I think there are a couple of reasons for that. I mean, one of them is that if you actually ask people about this president's agenda in a more granular way, which is actually kind of useful because it doesn't invoke some of the partisanship that I think these polls get, is you get numbers that are 80% or north therein. You know, the president just was out this week talking about replacing lead pipes. As you would imagine, that polls way over 80%. Ask people about his manufacturing agenda, standing up domestic industries here, semiconductors. If you actually ask folks about the specifics of the Inflation Reduction Act, the Infrastructure Act, the CHIPS Act in particular, semiconductor plants going up across the country, these things poll north of 80%. And then secondly, look, prices are too high. The president says that every time he talks about it. And that's why he is working aggressively to cut costs on prescription drugs, to cut costs for health care, proposals to lower the cost of housing, to build 2 million homes, and to cut the cost of child care. Now, if you look at the ideas from the other side of the aisle, they want to reverse every one of those policies and make it easier for folks to for the wealthiest people and their corporations to evade paying taxes. So that's a higher cost agenda. We're trying to push a lower cost agenda.
Well, inflation does remain a big concern for many Americans. So what is the president doing to alleviate that? When might Americans see some relief from high prices?
Well, of course, inflation is down 60% from its peak, and we have to continue our work to move it down even further. I think groceries are an area that are particularly sensitive, and grocery inflation has been zero for the past 2 months. So we've made progress there. I think where you see the president directly trying to lower costs and having some success, prescription drugs, the cost of insulin, the cost of health care coverage. In every case, this president has implemented plans that have lowered those costs. By the way, in every case, Republicans want to reverse that progress. So that's very problematic. If you take away the Inflation Reduction Act, which lowered the cost of prescription drugs, that cost is going to go up. Now, he also has very robust proposals, one to build 2 million affordable homes. And of course, we need to work with Congress to make that happen. So we're aggressively trying to build on the progress of lower inflation and even lower costs.
But in terms of a time frame, Jared, if people try to look ahead and plan for their futures and budget for things like groceries and those tangible sort of everyday goods, what should they be looking at if there is any kind of potential time frame in mind? If the president is reelected, how long would it take for prices to come down?
Well, again, I think one of the things we can look at is numbers like those in the jobs report today. I mean, one of the things we saw in this job report is that if you look at the share of women working in the workforce, the employment rate, that's the highest it's ever been, with data back to 1948. That is an historical record. We've talked about the record on the low unemployment. I think we also need to reference the fact that wages have been outpacing prices, real wage gains, for about 13 months in a row on a year-over-year basis. So paychecks are going further. And then I think, to get right to the heart of your question, I think you have to ask, who is fighting for whom? I mean, this is a president who is consistently fighting to cut taxes on the middle class and to ensure that the wealthy and the corporations pay their fair share, aggressively going after junk fees, whether it's credit card fees, airline fees, in entertainment. He's having, making real progress in cutting those junk fees. And of course, again, on prescription drugs, on health care, on the cost of insulin. These are measures that are, in effect, actively lowering costs that the other side wants to reverse. So who's fighting for whom becomes a very important question in this space.
We will see what the voters' assessment of that is. Jared Berstein, chair of the U.S. Council of Economic Advisors. Jared, thanks very much for your time.
You're welcome.